Successful Minds with Patricia Barnowski-Schneider, the show that takes you around the world to share interviews with some of the most successful and relevant people on the planet. Hear their stories and get the most important business lessons they have learned on their road to success and get exclusive advice on how to implement their success into your life and business. Successful Minds with Patricia Barnowski-Schneider is brought to you by the Strategic Advisor Board and your host, Patricia Barnowski-Schneider.
Hello and welcome back to Successful Minds. I'm your host, Patty Baranowski-Schneider. Today I'm joined by Gary Fahey, Executive Life Strategist, Counselor, Coach, and Consultant. So welcome, Gary. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
G'day, Patricia. Thanks for having me on. It's great to be chatting with you today. And I probably cover a few realms. I spent a long part of my life with the Australian Federal Police working in high performance fields, and I used to run the Australian Prime Minister's protection team and also the Commissioner's office. So I've lived a little bit of the high performance life.
Busy.
But I also, I also suffered with a major depressive disorder, and that came out in a gambling addiction as well. And ironically enough, that was during the most successful part of my career. And those struggles, they led to, we might as well get it out early. They led to, they led to me losing my career, ultimately, my reputation, and also had me seriously considering the value of my own life. I lost $2 million to gambling, plus whatever else comes with the downside of losing career, family, and all those sorts of things. And, I was in a place where I needed to not just get my act together, but figure out a system that I could live the next 40 or 50 years in a successful way. And I went away and I learned from and studied with and worked under experts around the world in neuroscience, psychology, peak performance, habit formation, and ultimately built a system that saved me. And it's been working ever since. The last 5, 6, 7 years, I've been fortunate enough to work with people in high performance fields that, just have struggled a little bit with the way that they're living their lives, even struggled in performance. I work with a lot of athletes as well that, struggle with performance and struggle in their personal lives. And I've been fortunate enough to have taken what was a very dark part of my life and transition that to working with people that, much like myself, are in a high performance field, a successful field, but just not achieving the things or the fulfillment that they think they should be having.
Right. Wow. Can't wait to hear all about this. But good for you. I'm actually proud of you. You did amazing. A lot of people take that road and they just keep going down with it. So you turned it around. That's awesome. And people learning from someone who's been there, done that, and not somebody who just read something in a textbook. It's very valuable. So that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, thank you. Look, I certainly have found that having the lived experience part of it, and it was part of my battle when I was struggling. That, if you're a high performer or an action taker or a problem solver, it's very difficult to turn up to somebody's office and say, "Hey, I've got a problem." And often, especially in this world, it seems to resonate a lot more if somebody has been through something, not necessarily the same, but we just don't know when we walk into a psychologist's office their history, and we still fear that judgment. And I think having lived both sides of the coin, or maybe the good side, the bad side, and then the better side, it does allow an opportunity to resonate with with those high performers, or the teams or the businesses that I work with.
That's awesome. Now, we kind of touched on this a little bit, so I guess I was going to ask if you could share the journey from being the Australian Federal Police to becoming an executive life strategist and mental health coach. But I guess what were the pivotal moments that led to this transformation? I guess it was when you reached,
look, there was there's probably a number along the way, and unfortunately, I think what happens to a lot of people is the noise gets louder and louder, and or the messages get louder and louder. And I battled this for 10 years, and probably the first 7 I wasn't even aware of it myself, or certainly not consciously anyway. And but at times over that 10-year period, there's a little whisper in somewhere in your head that says things aren't going right. And the less you listen to that message, unfortunately, the louder the noise has to get for you to listen to it. And over that that 10-year period, sure, there was that time that I was trying to mask it from myself, but then there started to come times of, recognizing that I was withdrawing from valuable things to me. I've spoken about being in a place where your children are hugging you and not wanting anything to do with being there in that cuddle. The people that love you the most, or that you love the most, and you don't want to be around them. That's a warning sign that I didn't listen to. And having to beg, borrow, and steal money if you are struggling to eat, pay mortgage, or anything like that because of the decisions that you're making. Again, it's another big warning sign. But if you don't listen to them, they get louder and louder. And ultimately, I made some silly decisions with my work credit card, and had to have a conversation with our deputy commissioner about what was going on there, and that led to me leaving the Australian Federal Police in not very nice terms. Not the way I would have liked to. I used to say not the way I would have chosen to, but unfortunately all of the actions that I did were mine. So I kind of did choose it, even though it didn't feel like it at the time. And so that was a big wake-up call, but probably not the biggest. I still, I moved away from gambling for a little while from that, and then went back to it again, and ultimately got to a place in my life where some of my story was leaked to the media. I certainly wasn't a celebrity or well-known down here, but my role was quite high profile. So it made a bit of a story, and some things got released in there that really upset me. And, that was a time when I did start to think, well, I've been trying to battle this for 10 years and I'm getting nowhere. And the only thing I'm doing is hurting people. Maybe life is better with me not in it. And that was where I really got scared and decided to make some changes and really start to explore. Again, I was a problem solver, and I really believed that if I could understand this, then I could fix it. And that's where the exploration started looking at to try and explain why an educated, a successful person would go down these paths. And that's really where the journey turned around.
I mean, that shows the strength, because so many other people would just be like, you know what, I just can't do this. It's easier with me not here. And they go through with that. And, it's basically like an addiction. And, they're not something that you normally see with your naked eye. It's usually somebody else who points it out, or the fact that you were able to see it. I mean, kudos to you for, sticking it out and, figuring out what the problem was and how to fix it, and that's, a lot of people will benefit from that. So that's awesome.
Yeah, thank you. It's look, it didn't feel great at the time, but I can tell you it's when you learn some of the strategies to come out the other side, that perspective now allows me to be grateful for that experience, notwithstanding it was hard at the time, but it has led to some wonderful places, which makes it very hard to be negative about those times these days.
I mean, it is true. Like, I have written one book about a lot of bad things that happened in my life, and it sucks at the time, but a lot of that stuff helps you be appreciative for, what do they say? You can't appreciate the rainbow without the rain. You can't appreciate good times without the bad times. I mean, you have to believe that things happen for whatever reason, but it does bring a whole new appreciation for the other side,
Yeah, that's true. And I also think that, I could have learned those lessons a different way. And I could have been here. I wish I could have been here without going through what I went through, but I wasn't prepared to listen to the lessons. And, I suppose that's what I like to do, especially for the individuals I work with these days. Is to try and be the coach that I needed. And that is, let's work on some things before you get to that phase. I didn't need to get to that period if I had have made different decisions earlier. But I ultimately did, and thankfully I'm on the other side.
Nice. Now, I guess you openly talked about your struggles with depression and gambling addictions, but now how did these challenges shape your approach to mental strength and performance coaching?
Yeah, I think it's they're a very significant part of my shift, but what they have allowed me to do over time was actually look a lot deeper at I've now got a master's in brain and mind sciences. So I now try to look at systems that are already in place inside the human mind and inside the human brain, and to realize that a lot of these conditions, symptoms, whatever people would like to call them for themselves, there is a natural reason why they exist inside somebody. And again, coming through the experience, I didn't realize this, but understanding the exact way that the emotional centers of the brain are working and the logical parts of the brain are working. When I work with clients, or even looking at my own experience, I can now sit back and quite easily map and explain the reasons why we end up where we end up. It doesn't really matter what the initial trigger was. It doesn't really matter what the initial trauma was. But the fact that there is some brain mechanics that are happening inside everyone that is very similar, no matter what the experience that you're having. And for me, I had a gambling addiction on the back of depression. But it wouldn't have mattered if it was anxiety, PTSD, addiction to alcohol or drugs or laziness or food. The gambling and the depression were more symptoms of a mechanics inside the mind and inside the stories that we tell ourselves. And, so developing that level of understanding, again, for the type of people I work with, myself included, problem solvers like to understand that there's a reason why this is happening, because if there's a reason and there's a mechanics to it, then there is a solution, or at least a workaround that gets you to the other side. And often that can take you not just from a mental health struggle, but it can open up a raft of better performances, whether it's in your professional life, in your athletic life, in your personal life. And probably the biggest thing I've learned now is the delineation between mental health and what I would like to call mental strength. Most people don't try and build their mental strength in good times. They just live their lives. And ultimately what they end up with is a mental health issue. And so my goal now is to help people understand who they are, understand what they want, and understand what the processes are to ensure that they're building their mental strength on a daily basis. And that typically leads to a greater level of performance in whatever field the person determines they want to direct it to.
That's awesome, because I've never heard that before. I mean, I don't really study this at all, but normally, like from what I know, the doctors will just say, oh, you're depressed. It's got to be family issues or whatever. But you're saying how it's like actually a mental thing that's already happening, whether you liked it or not, and that kind of leads to it, right? I mean, that's because I'm the same. I want to know why, explain this to me.
And look, I think as opposed to a genetic or a chemical issue that is existing, which, I don't discount that they may be there. The brain works in a pretty standard or typical way, time after time after time. Like it's for most people, the brain will work in exactly the same way. And in particular for this, it does get very, it's actually quite a simple, you can break it down to quite simple terms. And, we have a program that we are designed to run on. And then we have an emotional center that works 5 times faster than our logical brain. And then we have our logical mind. And at all times, our emotional center and our logical brain are responsible for informing the program of what to do. And eventually the program gets told enough times that this is what I do. It stops asking the question. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately for most people, we act instinctively from our emotional center, which means something happens and I look to survival mechanisms, fight or flight. That's typically what your depressions and anxieties and addictions are all coming from. And what we're failing to do is allow our logical brain to actually have a piece of the conversation, to say, hang on a minute, that's not what I want to be doing right now. And the brain doesn't understand context. So when I'm sitting in traffic and I'm getting annoyed and I'm getting anxious, the brain doesn't know whether you're sitting in traffic or, having a fight with a coworker or your partner's come home late. And it just knows that this pattern is what I've created. And what I try and help people do is, the term I use is build while the big dog sleeps. You've got to try and build systems while your emotional center is relaxed or is calm. Right. And that way, at least when you get into an emotional state, you've at least got a dog in the fight. Your logical brain can go, hang on a minute, we don't want to be doing this right now. Can we come up with another solution? Right. And, it seems simple, but it's just not easy to do.
Right. No, that's awesome. It's a nice different take on it, which is great. So I guess with your expertise in the psychology of peak performance and leadership, what are some common misconceptions people have about achieving peak mental states?
I think the biggest misconception that people face when dealing with this is the fact that they can achieve a peak mental state and stay in it forever. And I think there is, unfortunately, what happens is people identify this mental state that they want to be in, or this peak condition that they want, or even a peak performance that they're looking at. And even by definition, the term peak implies that there is a drop off at some point. Right. But, if any peak has it only has a peak because it goes up one way and down the other side. So, but what we fail to do in our thought process is understand that on the back end of the peak, there will be some downside. And then when people hit a level of peak performance and it drops off, they start to wonder, what's wrong with me? What do I need to do to go further? How do I get better again? Or how does it stay there? And, again, for things like
failure.
Yeah, I feel like a failure. I won and now I'm losing. I got the thing I wanted and now I don't feel great about it. I think there's a misconception around the term peak performance. It is something that people use and assume that once I hit it, I will stay there. They also assume that once they hit it, they will stay there by not doing any more work. And unfortunately, peak performance is a process, and I often talk about resilience being a dance, but so too is peak performance. And what that means is you move in and out of it. I like to use the term optimum performance or optimal performance these days because it can imply that you can stay high-ish for a longer period of time. Right. But I do think the misconception is that, A, once I achieve it, I will keep it. And B, I will keep it by not doing any more work. And often that is because a lot of people are set up for a goal-specific mindset instead of a process-specific mindset. And so once I hit my goal, I have no more objective. Whereas if you can shift the narrative to become a process-driven outcome or strategy, you always have something to keep moving towards. It's your process that drives you. It's your process that you need to be accountable to. And, I think that's where a lot of people see success and feel like that it is a permanent status.
Yeah, especially nowadays with, I guess like post-COVID, everybody became an entrepreneur and everything was remote. And it just seems like the whole landscape of work changed. And those who, like I always say, a lifelong learner, those who are constantly evolving and keeping up with the times, they're the ones that are going to succeed. But so many people just, like you say, they just felt, okay, I made it and that's good. That's all I have to do. Times are changing. And if you're not keeping up with everything, then you have yourself to blame because you have to evolve, Yeah.
Yeah, there's a great quote that says, the man who loves to walk will go further than the man who loves the destination. Yeah. And, some parts of what I do is help people learn how to love the walk, how to love the process, how to use the process as your goal. Because if you complete the process every day, you will hit your goal. There's no doubt about that, providing your process is right. But if you would like to lose 10 kilos or 10 or 20 pounds, if you eat right and that's your goal, if you exercise right and that's your goal, then one day in 6 months' time, you look back and you've gone way past where you thought you might have been able to achieve. But if you think that losing 20 pounds is your goal, two things are going to happen. Every day that you haven't lost 20 pounds, you're going to believe that you've failed. Right. And the moment you've lost 20 pounds, you're going to stop. And that's why people end up yo-yoing, is because they become accountable to the goal and not the process. And it's exactly the same in business. It's the same in sport. It's the same in health. And it's an issue or it's a misconception, I suppose, that people follow time after time.
No, I like this. I mean, it's definitely, you can, these are all proven, so people can't just, nice. So I guess what are some key strategies or tools that you recommend to high performers to overcome obstacles and optimize outcomes in both their professional and personal lives?
Yeah, I like to go deeper. I mean, there's plenty of tactics that, yeah, you can find on the internet, and all of them are very beneficial, and they're anything from mindful practices and breath work and journaling and all of these tactics that are very beneficial, and even if they're I'll say performance specific. So there's definitely tasks that no matter what field you're in, there are some specific tactics that you can use to improve your performance. One of the greatest difficulties with those, however, is they're often not built on the right foundation, or they're not built on any foundation, or at least not a conscious foundation. And so eventually doing the breath work daily, whilst it is of benefit, there's no tie to it. It's not tied to any increase in performance. So you feel good for a while, and you'll feel good forever if you keep doing it, but you don't have a compass point by which to attach it to. And so no matter whether or not it's a professional golfer that's looking to improve their putting game, a business person who is looking to increase their bottom line or their work-life balance, or have a lot more fulfillment in their family life, to me, it all starts with the foundation. It starts with building a very clear and specific understanding of who you are as a person, and a very specific understanding of what you want out of your circumstance and out of your life. Those two things become your North Star, and therefore all of your decisions can be made around those two concepts. The thing that adds to people is that when you do your breath work, or when you do your tactics that you're going to implement, they are actually now tied into a system or tied into a foundation. And it also allows people where a lot of high performers go wrong is at work, they're a particular type of person. At home, they're a particular type of person. With their friends, they're a particular type of person. Out for drinks, they're a different person. On the golf course, they're a different person. This becomes very challenging, and it also takes you in 4, 5, or 6 different directions. Ultimately, if you can bring that back to one clear identity, that identity then goes with you. And I know why I'm standing over this putt to make it. I know why I'm making this business decision. I know why I'm spending this time with my family. And that clarity allows performances to improve, whether it's professional or personal, no matter where they are. And it also allows you to be a lot more comfortable with who you are, where you are in life, and where you're moving towards.
I mean, that is good, because I mean, so many people, like, you'll say, well, who are you? And they're like, well, I'm a really hard worker and I work in this. That's what you do, but who are you? Like, a lot of people I'm a mom, but who are you? So they have their title, but I guess, understanding who you are and then making that your foundation is pretty huge. So a lot of people just don't even think about that.
No, it becomes like autopilot. We started something at 18, and we followed what societal norms told us was I needed to get promoted, I needed to make this amount of money or some level of more money, have this car, this house, and we just get on autopilot and forget to ever ask the question, again, who am I? And if a little tip for people, if I was to ask you that question and one of your first 2 sentences is something to do with your job or your family, then you need to revisit the who are you question, because you're right, that is what you do. Even being a mum, being a dad, being married, it might feel like who you are, but those are things that you do. You do being a mum. There might be an internal feeling about it, but start to look at the characteristics that make you up, that you can take everywhere with you. What usually they might be tied to values and beliefs, and that becomes who you are. And then you can start to make decisions. What would this person do in this moment? And if you are feeling depressed, or for me, having a gambling addiction, I at least get to ask the question, and I have my values on my phone. What would that version of Gary do? Would he have this bet right now? What would he feel? What would he understand? What would he ask? What questions would he ask? And it just allows you to, again, in that high pressure moment, remove the emotion from it and have a logical, conscious basis for which to make your choices. And 9 times out of 10, the human logical brain is right. It's just that the emotional brain gets in the way.
Yeah, that stupid brain, I know.
Yeah.
But it's
I mean,
it I don't know if it's a protective mechanism or what, but the emotional brain always interferes with everything. And it is
it's the
good if you
reason
could
why
set.
we're still, look, to be fair to it, none of the thoughts are unnatural, right? Sometimes they're unhelpful,
Yeah,
but the emotional brain is the single biggest reason why we're still alive as a species today.
yeah.
So it's very hard to be dirty on the emotional brain. It's required to drive us forward. It's required to keep us alive.
Yeah.
But now that we have the frontal cortex part of our brain, it would be wrong of us to not use it when we had the opportunity. So sometimes the conversations inside your mind are more important than the ones outside your mind.
Yeah, no, because I've had people tell me, take the emotion out of it. Logically, what would you do? And it's like, all right.
Yeah, and look, one of the biggest dramas that people face is that they try and do that in the emotional moment, and often it's too hard. And the analogy I use is if you've got kids or you've had kids, and at some stage when those kids were 3 years old, they wanted ice cream at dinner time.
Right.
And if you try and argue with a 3-year-old about ice cream at dinner time, then good luck. And we joke about that being a 3-year-old's tantrum, but that's exactly what our adult emotional brain is doing when we make decisions that we don't want to be making, right? And if you're in the heat of battle, so for me, when I was gambling, when I had an issue with gambling, once the process started in my head that this is now an emotional process that I need to gamble to survive, right? Whatever survival to my brain meant, but I am hurting and I need this to cope.
Right.
It's very difficult, if not impossible, to have a rational conversation with yourself in that moment. All of those conversations need to be held when your emotional brain is lowered, when your emotional brain is relaxed. So that's why, again, build while the big dog sleeps. You have to do the work when you are not emotional,
right?
So that when the emotion kicks off, you've actually got a chance to say, hang on, we've worked on this. We know the right thing to do, as hard as it might be. We can now have a logical conversation based around who I am and what I want to achieve.
Right, building that muscle.
Yeah, that's right. It is. It's just the muscle, and the more your logical brain gets a chance to imprint on the program, over time it becomes instinctive, right? Yeah. It's only instinctive because a program has been written, and we just have to take the opportunity to rewrite the program. And the same way that you build an addiction is the same way you get out of it. Except getting out of it is a conscious process, and getting in it is often an emotional, unconscious process.
Right. Good. Now, how has your master's in brain and mind science influenced your coaching methods and I guess the advice that you give to your clients?
Yeah, it's been very beneficial. I mean, again, I work with people who are high performers, who are action takers, who are problem solvers. They want to understand things. Often, once they have the understanding, they've got the answers themselves, but they just don't have the understanding. And, to be fair, neuroscience and psychology even can be very complicated in terms of their language, in terms of their words. And to be honest, even though I've got a master's in it, I probably don't understand most of it myself. But one area where it's really benefited me is the ability to take something that is complex and transfer that information into common vernacular, I suppose, or a method of language that can be understood by the people I work with. If I work with a builder, I will talk about building a foundation and how a house built without a foundation of concrete is going to topple over. And it allows me to build analogies like the emotional big dog, and understanding that this is how the brain has worked over millions of years, and transferring that technical into something that is quite usable for most people and actionable. And once it becomes actionable and easy to understand, again, most people I work with, they want to get, pardon my language, they want to get shit done. They don't want to worry about looking at, what happened when I was 8 and what happened when I was 15 and all of these sorts of things. They know there's a problem, and they want to know how to understand it, and how to solve it. And 9 times out of 10, they'll solve it because that's what they do. They're successful people in their own right, and successful people solve problems. So yeah, the formal education part not only has been a great understanding for me, but has allowed me to really link what is evolutionary pathways in our brain to successful outcomes for the clients.
I mean, yeah, I mean, if the fact that they can say, I need help, it's half the battle, because now you want to help yourself, and having someone, like I said, someone who's been there, it just has so much more validation. And because I know even with like counselors and whatnot, not everybody's the same. And, you can always tell when someone's just reading a boilerplate or what they learned in school. But when you have someone who physically knows what you've been through, because, I was there too, and not someone who, is this millionaire. It's, you're just like, yeah, you're getting rich off of me. I've had everything and I've lost everything. I know where you're at. I mean, that to me would be like, oh my God, you're my best friend. Now I know you can help me because you've been in my shoes, Yeah,
and there's an element of safety too, because again, high performers fear being judged, or they fear failing.
Yeah.
And when you walk into somebody's office and quite rightly, you don't know whether the psychologist you're talking to has had difficulties in their life. Most of them probably have, but it's not their role to express those to you. And so there's always a part of you that's a bit guarded when you go in. This is certainly my experience. And also too, when you go in with the feelings that you have on the day. So if you're having a bad day, you might vent a little bit more about different things. If you're having a good day, you may not share as many things. Yeah. One of the really great benefits of having lived through it is I know the lies. Right. And not that they're intentional lies, but I know what people tell themselves about how they get through. Right. I know what it feels like. It's not even that I know what it looks like, or I know what the experience is. I know what it feels like. And fortunately, I've been gifted, I suppose, with an ability to transfer that feeling, or at least express that feeling in a way that clients will say to me, like, how do you know? Yeah. And, the simple fact is I know because I've been there. Yeah. And then, that does build trust, that builds rapport. And it also allows somebody to say, you know what, this guy is not going to judge me because he's been there, and I'm happy to share mine. If that helps somebody feel a bit more comfortable with me, then I am more than happy to, to share that part, because it's still a learning experience for me. Every client I have, I learn more about myself. And I find it a fascinating conversation. I don't do counseling sessions the way counseling sessions are done. I've never done one in an office. I do them over coffee. I do them over steak. I do them over golf. Because now it's just two blokes trying to solve a problem, not one person sharing their problems with another.
Yeah. And it makes you real. I mean, I know everybody likes their own different approach, but, I like having like a real human, someone who you've already proven yourself. So you're not like someone who's just saying, okay, you're holding your cup looking for food. You've overcome everything. You're a real person. And to me, that the fact that you're living by examples. You can show people how you can overcome this. I didn't think I could either, and I did it, and I'm going to help you do the same. That gives you a lot more validation, So good stuff.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Now, from your experience running the Australian Prime Minister's protection team, what are some crucial leadership lessons that you learned that are applicable in everyday life and business?
Yeah, I'd probably come back to something I touched on a little before, and that is the leaders that I have worked with, I suppose the real pointy end leaders. You're talking about somebody running a country. They are very clear and very specific about who they are and what they want out of their lives, in both their professional lives and their personal lives. They are very conscious about decisions they make. They are, constantly reviewing and reflecting on who they are and where they're going, and where does this decision fit in with where I'm going to be. The great thing about that is decisions get made a lot less emotionally. Now, it's not to say that emotional decisions are always bad, but typically the ones that the decisions that we regret the most are typically more emotionally fueled. And if we can create more consciousness about our decisions, and we can make them more logically towards a specific, not just an abstract goal or objective, then success is going to come at some way, shape, or form. And at the very least, you're going to be comfortable knowing that you made decisions for the right reasons. Even if it goes bad, you have that level of comfort that this was the best decision I could make with the information I have available. And so it is very clear to me that for all the people I've worked with around the world, even learned from and even studied, the most successful people in the world at everything they do, whether it's the most successful father, that this is not about money or status, the most successful, council worker, the most successful mum, the most successful relationships, they all come from a very clear and specific understanding of who you are and what you want.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that is important in everything in life, your job, because, like you said, sometimes maybe growing up, you were told, you have to do this, get a job, make good money. And it could be something that you really, like, let's just say, I don't know, I'm this nature lover, blah, blah, blah. And now I'm working with, I don't know, an oil company, and finding out who you really are. Maybe I could realize that that's part of why I've never been so happy, because this has nothing to do with what I even like. This goes against what I like, so it all comes from that foundation of who you are, and really, understanding that and being, I guess, in a better position to say, okay, what is it that's going to make me happy? Goes a long way, and you help bring that out. So that's pretty good.
Yeah. And it also, it allows you to sustain success. I mean, you can be successful doing something you don't like, and you can bite down and grind it out for 50 years and be miserable and still be successful in some way, shape, or form in terms of money or in terms of status. But if you make decisions based on who you are genuinely and where you are, where you would like to go in life, success becomes a lot more sustainable, because it's no longer about an outcome. It's getting you back to that loving the walk. This is the path that I am on, and I will stay on this path for the rest of my life. There is no end to the path, and I don't think that's a negative connotation. I don't want the path to end. I want to keep growing. I want to keep building. I want to keep finding new things that enrich me. And also too, if you do go through the work and you happen to be in a job that doesn't necessarily fulfill you, often a shift in perspective allows you don't have to leave your job, especially if it's a job that is providing your family security and providing money or whatever it is that you're looking for.
Right.
But if you understand who you are and what you want, you can also very easily understand that job is now a tool or a vehicle to allow you to take your kids to soccer 3 times a week and once on the weekend, or live in the house that you would like to make sure that in a secure area, in a secure neighborhood. Now, all of a sudden, the job that I don't like actually has some meaning, and going to that job now has some purpose. We might be miserable in our job, but if we can look at who I am and what I want out of life, I can actually put that job in there somewhere and say, this job has its purpose. Right. This job is providing me the ability to have every weekend off with my family, or this job is providing me, the ability to, if I love the environment, because I have this job, I am able to on weekends go and clean up the beaches, right? If I didn't have this job, I wouldn't be able to travel or live near the beach or do any of those things. Now, if the job that you're doing is diametrically opposed to the morals that you have, then probably understanding that is of benefit as well. But it's not always the case that the thing you don't like, you have to stop, because it may well have a place in helping you achieve the thing that you do want.
Right. And instead of you being miserable and upset or sad about it, you're helping them to see the bright side of it.
Absolutely. Like how great is this, that this job that I don't particularly like lets me go on a 6-week holiday every year around the world, which my family loves, and that fulfills me. And I'm prepared to put up with the other, 46 weeks of the year. in order to have this 6 weeks. Some people are, some people aren't, but at least now your decision is conscious and logical. It's not just I'm on the treadmill and I'll just keep doing whatever I've been doing.
Right. Now tell us, as an ambassador for the Australian and New Zealand Mental Health Association, what message do you most want to convey about mental health, especially in high pressure environments?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose it was quite an honor, especially having gone through a lot of the things that I've been through, to be invited or accepted as an ambassador for the Australian and New Zealand Mental Health Association. And I get the luxury of talking to people all around the world about mental health and specifically about addiction. I think that, and I probably will target this more specifically at people in the high performance fields, because I understand that, that whilst there is some crossover for a lot of people, there are differences in the way that people will understand themselves. And I think that the message that I wish I had have learned earlier was about building a conscious mental strength on a foundation of who I was, a foundation of identity. Yeah. And often putting off that practice leads to mental ill health. And the issue that a lot of high performers have is putting things into compartments in their head, saying that they'll deal with those later or not deal with those at all. And having a clear understanding of who you are allows you to speak to somebody about what you're feeling. Mental ill health, for me, depression and gambling addiction, ultimately was a depth that I found because I didn't understand who I was 10 years earlier. It's very controversial of me, I think, to say, but I believe that all mental health is self-made. I do understand that there are some chemical and genetic issues or elements that play a part. However, I know that people experience some trauma, and on day one of my depression, it may not have been self-made. But every day after that I chose not to work on my mental strength was my responsibility. And I accept that people have struggles in their life, and those struggles lead to bad emotional states or bad feelings. Right. But every day that you don't do something about it, or you don't build your mental strength, or you don't take the opportunity to understand who you are and make decisions in aid of supporting that person, you are contributing to your own mental ill health. Right. And so the message that I would like to share with a lot of high performers is this is a performance tool. This isn't a mental health awareness campaign. This isn't a help to fix yourself if you are struggling. Now, if you are, then certainly you need to speak to somebody. Right. But working on your mental strength is actually a performance enhancer. If you are looking for long-term sustained success in your personal and professional life, right, taking a mental strength approach is going to be better for your outcomes long-term. So if you want to be successful, this is just a tool. Right. This is no different than lifting weights if you want to be a professional athlete. It's no different than learning your sums if you want to be a professional, a business person. Right. And so that's, again, I highlight that is a message, I suppose, to more high performers, but anybody can use that system to get better.
Now, what do you think? Because I know some people who they don't see it themselves that they have issues, but other people do. So for someone who doesn't think that they have any problems, if everybody around you seems to think you do, in theory, that should be something you should acknowledge and listen to, no? Or do they have to physically see it themselves to realize that they need this help?
Well, I suppose there's probably two answers to that question. If everybody else sees it, that's probably true. Yeah. However, making any change relies on the individual not necessarily recognizing that there's a problem, but wanting to be better. Right. And probably, again, the message that I would like to share with people is, I don't care if you think you have a mental health problem. Right. If you want to improve your life, then work on your mental strength. Don't even worry about going to see somebody about a mental health problem. You don't have to rock up to the psychologist and tell them that you're depressed or anxious or worry about doing the test. If that's not where you're at right now, then work on your mental strength so that your performance improves, that your business life improves, that your family life improves, that your athletic life improves. Work on the mental strength side. I come from a very firm place that working on building mental strength will ultimately overcome the mental health issue. I have a theory. I wrote about this in my book, certainly my own experience. The first question was, how the hell did I get here? And the second is, how the hell do I get out? And I've found time and time again, especially for my clients and myself, the how did I get here part is largely irrelevant. The how do I get out part is the most important thing. And therefore, it's all about focusing forward. If you create a compelling enough vision of the future, your past will become a lot smaller in the rearview mirror. There is a misconception that we need to get over our past or forget our past or it doesn't exist. Not going to happen. Your brain is too powerful for that. It will always be there. Yeah. But if there's two things for you to look at and one is more compelling than the other, your brain will also be naturally drawn to the most compelling thing in your mind. Right. If you can create a compelling enough vision of the future, and you can, everybody can, then the thing of the past becomes a lot smaller in comparison. And yes, it will come up from time to time, but because you are so focused on where you are going next, it just becomes less relevant. It becomes less important, and it becomes a real strong part of where you're going. If you've been through some trauma and some heartache or some struggle, that's actually the resilience and the strength that builds the next phase of where you're going. Right. And starting to look at it with gratitude, reduces its power over you, and B, allows you to use it to fuel where you're going to go to next. So yes, if people around you are starting to identify that you have a problem, perhaps have the awareness enough to at least ask the question of yourself, do I? But if you aren't yet there, because I wasn't for a long time, just start making some choices to build your mental strength for your performance sake and see what happens.
Well said. Now, based on your personal experience and professional expertise, what advice would you give to someone struggling with an addiction, whether it's gambling or something else?
I won't go back to the figure out who you are part. I've said that probably enough. It's the first step I do with everybody. I don't care who you are, where you are, whether you're on bouncing off rock bottom or on the edge of greatness. The very first step is to figure out who you are deep down, not who you tell yourself you are, not who you are pretending to be, not who other people tell you are, but a real, brutal, honest appraisal of who you are. Again, not the person you've been acting as, right? Not the depressed person or the gambling person or the angry person. Just because you've been acting that way, that's generally not who you are. The question is, who would you be if your emotions couldn't get in the way? If your emotions could not get in the way, who would you be? And then make every effort possible to take steps towards that person. Mm-hmm. It's as simple as that. It's not easy, but it is genuinely as simple as that. If you understand who you would be without your emotion, if the emotions couldn't get in the way, and every day you do things that person would do, then one day you'll wake up and you'll be that person.
It's good. I mean, a lot of people don't, it's easy for the typical psychologist to start with when you were a kid, bringing like your family did this, but it does stem with you. And I mean, that's all really valid. If you don't know who you are and where you come from, I mean, it's kind of hard to create that better path.
Yeah. And look, I speak in absolutes mostly because I want to move people, not because I genuinely believe that these are absolutes.
Right.
But it's irrelevant what happened in your past. I'm sorry to say it's irrelevant, because the simple fact is the only thing that matters is where you are right now and the next thing that you do. You're only responsible for the next right thing. Now, again, as I said, I talk in absolutes, but your past is irrelevant right in this moment.
Right.
It has some relevancy to you and to where you are going, and there is another time for you to explore that. But if you are struggling, and again, this doesn't matter if you're struggling at rock bottom or you're sitting on the edge of greatness and you just need that little tip to go over the edge, the only thing that matters and the only thing that you can do is the thing that you can do right now. And that's why I like to say that, that how did I get here part becomes far less relevant to the how do I get out, the how do I move forward, the how do I make the next step. And, it's very difficult because that's not the system that we're built up in. And a lot of people early in this journey need somebody to put their arm around them to say, it's okay, these things happened and let's talk about it. And let's, but you can only talk about it for so long. Even if you are starting to talk about it, it's fantastic. Talk therapy is proven. It works. It helps. But you still have to do something. Where you are right now is where you are, irrespective of how you got here or why you are here. And again, I'm fortunate enough to work with action takers and problem solvers that really resonate with that message. They don't want to spend hours and weeks and months and years exploring why they got here, because all they're going to do is take a year and they're still in the same place and maybe worse.
Yeah.
So if you are engaging in some form of talk therapy, fantastic, keep it going, but also start to take steps towards that person that you want to become, that person that you can be proud of. Figure out what does that person do every single day, and then start doing that. Start doing it small. It's fine, one thing at a time, but start doing it.
I mean, that is true. I've known people did the talk therapy for years, didn't accomplish anything because it wasn't helping them move forward. It was just really talking about what got you here, and this one's blaming this one's blaming, and that's where it ended. It just it never proceeded further. Yeah,
exactly. And it has a place. As I said, it's fantastic. There's certainly no knock on it from me, but
right.
This is a toolbox that you need to have multiple tools in, and one of them may be talk therapy for you, but one of them definitely has to be some form of action to move forward. If in the absence of moving forward, you will struggle for a very, very long time.
Right. So I guess, what are your future goals, both as a coach and an individual? And how do you see your role evolving in the field of mental health and peak performance?
Yeah, I mean, my own personal goals are, I suppose they're multifaceted at the moment. I've just been invited and almost just short of being accepted to doing a PhD next year.
Nice.
So as a 47-year-old, going back to uni again,
Right.
it'll be working in the field of psychology and on conscious decision making. I'll be working around the gambling field, and again, that's probably a little nod to the work that I've been able to do in myself. And not too many addicts can go back to their own field without being triggered. So I'm fortunate enough that, or it's probably evidence enough that the work that I do does work.
Yeah.
And I did some research in gambling last year, and I'm pretty confident that that won't be a trigger for me. So on a personal note, the PhD will be something that is very important to me.
Right.
I suppose trying to create an impact around the world and moving away from the mental ill health conversation and into the mental strength, and really using mental strength for peak performance. I do want people to understand that this is a performance tool. When you are at the upper levels of your field, again, whether that field is parenting, relationships, whether it's business, entrepreneurship, or athletics, when you are at the upper echelon, or you want to be at the upper echelon, it is the mental game that makes the difference. Everybody in your field has very similar physical capabilities or skills, or all of those things are out there.
Right.
The difference is the mental game, the mental strength, and really trying to push with businesses as well. I work with companies and I work with teams as well as individuals to understand that mental strength is a performance enhancer. This isn't just a matter of reactive systems when things break down.
Right.
They're proactive measures as an insurance tool to make sure they don't break down,
Right.
and as a performance tool to make sure that where you're at can be better. And I've been lucky enough to work with a lot of people. We're building programs for athletes, for veterans as well. This is a very big space for veterans who are struggling with identity and building a life post-career, and business people. So that's where my head is at for the next next 12 months, maybe 3 years. And also got myself a young family as well. And I'm fortunate enough, again, I've done this work on myself. People tell me I'm too busy. I feel like I've never had more time available because I know who I am, I know where I'm going, and I know where it all fits. And that's my plan. I'm 47 now. By the time I'm 50, people will hopefully realize that things don't just happen when you're 50, they happen when you're 47 and you start taking the journey.
Nice. Very nice. Now you work, I know you mentioned golf and eating, but you work with people around the world, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I've got a lot of clients in the UK, in the US, and in Australia, probably the three main countries that I work with.
Okay.
Very fortunate. Sorry for those that in Australia that I'm about to say this, but the US does tend to be a little bit more advanced in their acceptance and understanding of performance coaching, and mental strength, at least more willing to engage in it for personal development and growth. But yes, it's getting a little bigger down here in Australia as well. So individuals that are either struggling and looking for ways to move forward, or just can't get past a certain barrier in their life or their performance, is typically where I work. Teams that are looking to build an edge over competitors, and also businesses that are trying to inculcate a level of mental well-being and mental strength in a way that resonates with their staff, not in your necessarily textbook manner. It comes from a textbook, but it's actionable, it's practical, and it's things that people can implement day after day for improved performance.
Nice. Now, is there anything else you want to talk about that you're working on, that's going on, or did we cover everything, or anything else you want to touch on?
No, look, I think we've covered a lot. We've certainly gone around the grounds on a whole bunch of things that I do, and I've really enjoyed the conversation. The main reason that I'm doing a PhD, I said to my supervisor when she asked, was I would do this anyway. My downtime is this. I love it.
Nice.
I love researching. I love the brain and the mind, and knowing that we have control over where we are and where we're going, and our performance and our skill enhancement is really entrenched in who we are, the thoughts we have, and that there's a mechanical system that we get to control if we make those choices. So I appreciate having the conversation. As I said, I would do this all day, every day if I could.
No, I'm learning so much. So I think it's awesome. So how can people get a hold of you and learn more about you?
Yeah, look, the best way is my name, Gary Fahey. It's Fahey. If you Google it, there might be some bad stuff from 10 years ago that's still in there, but most of it's good stuff these days. You'll find my website. It's garyfahey.com, specifically for the high performance coaching. We're also building out some group coaching programs for men, which my other business is Strong Mend, MEND. And that's my Instagram as well, or Facebook is Strong Mend. People want to connect on LinkedIn. My name, if you'll probably find me somewhere around the traps. And if anybody is interested in having a conversation, if you don't happen to be in Brisbane, I usually shout people at coffee just to say good day and share a bit of my story, or see if I can help you build a strategy. Certainly no obligation. If teams or businesses are interested, send me a message. I'll shout you a virtual coffee if I can, and spend a half hour trying to help you build a strategy. And again, no obligation, but I just love doing this stuff, and I really appreciate the chance to talk to more people.
Peace. Well, thank you again for being on the show. Again, that was Gary Fahey. So thanks for listening to Successful Minds with Patty B. Never miss an episode by subscribing to the show. So thank you again.
Thank you for listening to Successful Minds with your host, Patricia Barnowski-Schneider. Please leave your feedback and visit strategicadvisorboard.com to get the latest and greatest business advisement on the planet. Follow us on social media for updates, and we'll see you on the next episode.